My mental health wasn't very good. I was kind of really struggling, didn't really know why. And I've kind of been on this really long journey, discovery of learning about myself and why I was feeling like this. And during that discovery, I found Ben and the new normal. And Ben was very much like me. My life was just very grey. I never really felt sad, didn't really feel happy, and nothing excited me, nothing. Get very angry very easily, and felt this real desperation of I need some help. People are sort of coming to me and asking what's wrong with you. I think with men's mental health is that you have to set the example. That's something that I think that I found from Ben originally, like finding that video on Instagram of him just setting the example of being vulnerable and being open and honest, talking about something that I had hidden. Both experienced the same thing, but he was just telling everyone about it, whereas I told nobody about it.
Hey everyone, I'm Corey Cummins, the founder of Manly Combos. Welcome back to another episode. If you haven't listened to any yet, just to give you a quick background on what we're trying to do here. So what we're trying to do is destigmatize men's mental health through one conversation at a time. And we're doing this by having conversations with men who've gone to therapy, by mental health professionals, and also talking to nonprofits and men's mental health groups. So today I have Matt here from Boys Talk. And we'll love to kind of know a little bit more about you, and then we can kind of jump into, the charity and your story.
Corey, yeah, my name is Matt, and I'm a volunteer host for the New Normal, which is a registered charity that provides peer-to-peer support meetings for people with grief and mental health. Predominantly a grief support charity, and they run 30 plus meetings a week all over the world now for people with grief. And then sort of towards the back end of 2020, when the pandemic was ruining everyone's lives, they started mental health charities. Is that your ice cream man, or is that my ice cream man?
I was like, I would love some ice cream, but it's somewhere outside.
They started Boys Talk and Girls Talk, which are, as you'd expect, peer support meetings for men and women to come together to talk about anything that affects their mental health. And that's the meeting that I now predominantly host with some other great guys. Every 2 weeks, we get together via Zoom. Which I think is a really great way to sort of anybody can come. Anybody, you don't have to get to a meeting room or a community center somewhere. You can sit in your comfort of your own home. I started attending these meetings about 2019, I think. My mental health wasn't very good. I was kind of really struggling, didn't really know why. And I'd kind of been on this really long journey of discovery, of learning about myself and why I was feeling like this, and kind of delved into lots of podcasts, lots of books to really find out what was happening. And I did a bit of therapy, sort of started my therapy journey with work. I was doing quite a weird job, that stressful, that they gave us some free sessions like once a month, I think, which kind of really helped me think, oh, actually, maybe this is something I need. Then during that discovery, I found Ben and the new normal, and Ben was very much like me. You know, we were of a similar age. We've grown up in very similar places, both from London, and he was very happily talking about his dad had passed away, and and my dad had passed away when I was younger. I was 16, and I hadn't really told anybody about it. Never spoke to anybody, not outside of the close family. It wasn't anything I ever spoke about, and I've sort of come to learn now that all of that depression and mental health struggles, it was kind of all resurfacing from when I was younger, and all the trauma that I hadn't dealt with, and all these fears of abandonment, and sort of a general childhood that it wasn't bleak, but there was some stuff back there that I never really got dealt with, and it all kind of came back, and having children of my own, and the life stresses of day-to-day life had really taken a toll on me, and being a classic man, I hadn't told anyone about it until it got to a really bad place. But I found the new normal, and started to attend their good grief meetings, where it was the first time I'd sat in a room with strangers and told them that, my story, and listened to other people's stories. And from that day, I've never left. Attended lots and lots of meetings, and then became a host to provide those spaces for others.
Well, let's kind of break this into two parts. Let's talk about kind of your journey, and then let's talk about these the sessions, because they're both great. So you were saying you decided, I guess, how did you take that step to go to therapy? Because that's where most men, I think there's a lot of men that are potentially in the back of their mind thinking about it, but don't ever take that step. So how did you actually get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna go do something about this?
It was quite, I think I remember back then it was very different, and now I really struggle to remember the person I was back then. That generally life was just very grey. I never really felt sad. I didn't really feel happy. I was just sort of living in this really weird world of grey and meh, and nothing excited me. Nothing. Get very angry very easily, and having small children around, you lose your patience quite quickly. And I was just not a very nice person to be around, I don't think. And felt this real desperation of, I need some help. I think I got to a point where my wife at the time was sort of sat down and was just like, people are sort of coming to me and asking what's wrong with you. That you're generally just moody and not a very nice person to be around. And I sort of broke down and was just like, well, is anyone ever thinking, well, maybe you need some help? And just sort of broke down, and it sort of became this point where we both were like, yeah, I think we need to do something about this. But I kind of alluded to it earlier, and I did do sort of one session a week at work, or one session a month with work. And that therapist there, she was like, you can talk about anything you like. You don't necessarily have to talk about, the stresses of the job. So that kind of gave me an introduction to it. And I was like, actually, this is really good, but I wish I could do some more. And then I do remember quite distinctly being like, well, okay, how do I get therapy? Where do you start? So you sort of do some Googling, and then you find some places, and you're just like, oh, how much? That's quite a lot of money. And then went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, yeah, you can phone this number, but the waiting lists are really long. Generally was like, there's not really a way to go. So kind of knew I had to go privately, and then sort of found a place just Googling it. Did a couple of those for good at the time, but I just kind of felt like they weren't really going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what a big myth and a big thing that people don't understand is that, it was something I didn't really know, you find out later on, is that you don't have to stick with the first therapist you're given. and that you can, it's just like anything really, like dating or finding somebody. I don't know. You generally, you have to get to know them, and they, what their skill set is. Is it going to help me? Am I, is this the right place for me? And I think the first therapist wasn't really good. And then a friend of mine, I think I was very lucky in that sense as well, that somebody, like a close friend, kind of noticed that I wasn't behaving quite as I should be. Kind of took me to one side at a party once and said, like, I think you're dealing with anxiety and that you need to, I can help you. And she put me in touch with a charity that she had used locally. And I did some sessions with them. They were like discounted. I still had to pay for those, but I did that for a really like good 3 months, maybe even more, until I sort of just literally ran out of money. I couldn't do it anymore. But then I think that's kind of coincided when I found TNN, and that all their meetings are free and you sit in a kind of group scenario. At the time when I started, it was in person. So you went to a room, and you sat with these people and you talked about grief, and I learned so much in those months. And I think it really helped me understand, oh, wait, actually, yeah, this is a big deal. Like what happened to me was a really big deal. And that I think we're all kind of encouraged just to push things under the carpet, just carry on, keep calm and carry on. And that I was like 16, and like so much of my life changed, and I kind of hadn't really given it the importance of, but I was a child at the time as well, losing such a big figure in my life and just expecting just to be okay afterwards. I think it was just very naive. But yeah, so I started to attend those meetings, and then I was doing the therapy, and I was on antidepressants as well at the time, and I never really wasn't really talking to anyone about it. It was kind of all, but yeah, I kind of got to a place where I was in a much better place mentally, and then they introduced the Boys Talk meetings, and then I just knew that because I'd done so much learning about mental health, that men generally it is a problem, an epidemic, isn't it? That we leave it too late to kind of reach out. That I knew that these meetings were really important and that I should attend them. Mm. Even though I was in a much better place, it was a good place for me to be and just to share my story and to talk to other men. And yeah, we've been doing those for 4 years. And yeah, it's just an amazing space to just talk, and it's kind of replaced therapy for me. But part of me still thinks, oh, I should go back to therapy. It was so beneficial, and it helped me so much, helped me understand so much, and helped me learn about myself so much that I should go back. But
if you were to go back now, what would you go back for now? Because obviously you went for a certain reason to start. What would be the impetus for you to go now? Because I agree with you. I've gone to therapy multiple times at different stages, whether I lost my mom when I was 25, she died. And then, whether break up with a girlfriend or work or whatever it is, it's, what would be your reason to go back?
If I was to go back now, there are definitely parts of me that I'd like to understand more. And I recently separated from my wife. It's been 2 years now, so it's not actually that recent, but you kind of learn lots of things are going along the way. Well, I took the time to really try to learn about, what part I played in that separation, right, and what parts of it were like down to me, or why did it happen, and kind of did some exploring. And then you kind of actually go, oh, actually, I know that I was anxiously attached, and lots of things like that I could probably take the time to kind of learn about myself. But then there's other parts, kind of really understanding myself a bit better. But I think generally it's just like it's just to stay in a really good place. I think that's more important. I think that I kind of looked at therapy in the past as something you did when you were in trouble or you were in crisis, or whereas you kind of having that general conversation with somebody about the hard parts of life that maybe you couldn't have with a friend. But even now, I'm much better at sharing, and that I have some close friends that we can just talk about anything, and that there's no shame or no stigma, and you can actually, which is also really beneficial, which I've learned along the way as well, is that why are we keeping all this stuff inside? Why are we not sharing it with people? And that the generally outward perception of ourselves is, oh, everything's great, I'm doing really well, and you actually, well, no, not every day. Some days you do struggle, and why aren't we talking about that with more people? But yeah, I think if I was to go back, it would just be just to stay healthy mentally.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Well, when my mom was battling cancer, I didn't speak to anybody about it except for my girlfriend at the time. And yeah, that's something I definitely learned from going to therapy, is being able to talk to people that are close to you that can be there to support you and everything. I was very much, I was like, oh, everything's fine. But it obviously wasn't. She was battling really, she was declining in not the best way, but yeah. And then I also talked to my friends about going to therapy. They're like, why do you continue to go? I'm like, well, why do you go to the gym? And, I said, if I ever got into a serious, like a long-term relationship again, that I would do relationship counseling or therapy like once a month. So like you have this place where you can check in and talk and have these open conversations, because, you have two people from different backgrounds and different way of perceiving the world and understanding the world. Because the same thing with relationship therapy, people go to it when things are bad. You're like, well, actually, you should probably go to it earlier to like really make sure that you're being healthy about things. But I do think things are slowly starting to change. But it's interesting to hear you say that, because I don't hear a lot of people say that. So that kind of makes me smile a little bit.
Which bit is changing?
The way that people perceive therapy.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, there's still a lot of people that still don't understand it or get it, but I do think it is starting to change. I think COVID had that impact. I think COVID has had a lot of impact on people, and I think it made people realize, okay, maybe we need to do something to figure it out.
Yeah.
Before you went to therapy, was there any preconceived notions you had about it?
I think so. I think generally I kind of always considered it something that other people did that maybe had more money than I did. I think the general cost of it is quite well known. It does cost quite a lot of money, which I think that should change. It should be wider available on the NHS, like the services are. But I guess, just that general idea that it's going to be quite a sterile environment where, no, I think it was quite an admittance of, oh yeah, I maybe have gone a bit mad. And it's sort of this connection that's somewhere you go when you've gone a bit crazy, which is such a bad stigma to attach to things, isn't it? And and like you said, that you use the connection of the gym. People spend days and days and days in the gym, don't they? And I don't think it's any different, and that we have to kind of exercise this muscle just as much as we exercise other muscles as well.
No, I completely agree. You said you have 3 kids, and going to therapy has obviously had a big impact on you. How have you seen you going to therapy and working on your mental health kind of change the relationship you have with your
I think it's actually changed massively, and even doing the talking meetings with the new normal, it's made me think such a better human being. I'm a lot better at just communicating how I feel, and that I generally think also there's kind of this realization one day of like actually attitudes towards me and looking after myself and mental health are being passed down by other people, whereas these little people now are like my responsibility to teach them actually maybe there's a better way, and that maybe we can all just be a little bit more vulnerable and honest with each other, and rather than me constantly trying to pretend I'm a grown up and I know everything and that I'm right all the time, that they must do things the way I tell them to. It's actually, I do make mistakes, and at this point, when there's a communication breakdown and one of the kids has had a tantrum, and then in the past I would have just lost my temper, there would have been some shouting, and it would have just made the situation worse. Whereas now I can say, oh, actually, I can see that you're angry. Why are you angry? And we can have a conversation about how you feel. How do you feel at this point? Mate, I'm obviously kind of not helping the situation, making the situation worse by something. Let's talk about it. And then generally, I think that my children are generally calmer around me, and I'm calmer around them nowadays than we were 4 or 5 years ago. But it's interesting that my children have actually had some sort of struggles, and that maybe when we were younger, it would probably have just been sort of put down to hormones or something, but they're kind of having their own sort of individual struggles. And my eldest was just like, no, I don't want to go and see a therapist. Or, we reached out to a local mental health charity. He was just really against going and could not convince him to go. And I tried really hard. And there's obviously something in him already, that he was just like, no, I don't want to do it. Yeah. Which I found quite surprising considering his age. But so whatever, thoughts and perceptions society have get in there really early, because he's not that old. Find that quite interesting. And I was quite honest. I said, that I did it. And, this point of time I was struggling with X, and it really helped me. But he was just flat against it, really.
Kudos for you for being open to him and trying to get him to try it. Not all parents would be able to have that. So it's super strong. So if we're to now look at the group, so how can you talk a little more about how the groups are structured? So for people are listening, I guess, how do they work? What do you guys talk about? Just get a better understanding of it.
So Boys Talk is one meeting of many now that the New Normal run. So generally there's probably a meeting for anybody to come to if you wanted to. I think I did do a quick count earlier. There's like 11 different groups you can join.
Okay.
But yeah, so Boys Talk, effectively anybody that identifies as a man can come along to a meeting. They're on Tuesday evening, 7:30 UK time. We do get people joining now from other parts of the world. Normally America kind of time zones, it kind of helps slot in their sort of lunchtime, I think. But so it's via Zoom, so you can join from anywhere in the world, really, as long as it's it fits with your time. They start at 7:30 and we aim to finish around 9 o'clock. So it's about an hour and a half, and they're very informal. We have a sort of bit at the beginning where we read some general rules and guidance just to make sure it stays a safe space. That's what we always say. It's a safe space for you to come and talk, but to make sure it stays a safe space, we just have a few pointers and a few sort of simple rules about, staying on mute. So, when you're in a group discussion, you can kind of see when somebody else wants to talk and you get those sorts of indications. Whereas on Zoom, it gets a bit complicated. People are trying to talk over each other. So we kind of stay on mute so we can give the speaker our full attention. And then we do a very quick go round and introduce ourselves. So the host, we normally host in pairs. So myself or the other host will say who we are. So I would say, my name is Matt, and I come to Boys Talk for, X reason. And that, in the past, I've suffered with depression and find that talking to people of a similar experience really helps. Right. And then each person will go around and quickly introduce themselves, their name, their pronouns, if they're comfortable, and then a little reason as to why they're there. And then we open up the group and just say, does anyone want to start? Anyone have anything they'd like to say? 9 out of 10 times somebody will raise a hand and they'll bring a topic up, and then we'll talk about it, in the group. Anything from, just general stresses of work to sort of eating disorders, anxiety. Anxiety does come up a lot. Relationships, separation. divorce. But yeah, anything, you can talk about anything really. And then we generally sort of give everyone the opportunity to share. The amazing thing is there's normally somebody in the meeting who will say, "Oh, I feel can understand that. I can understand what you mean by that. I've been there. I found that this was really helpful when I was in that situation." And then that's always the amazing thing about the Boys Talk meetings is that generally you sort of bring in people together who are, all sharing the same, not exactly the same, but generally it's kind of, we're all suffering with very similar things.
How long are the sessions? You say an hour?
About an hour and a half, yeah. The official time is 8:45 to end, but we normally finish about 9, give everyone a chance to talk. But yeah, they're very, very informal, very relaxed. There's never any pressure to speak if they don't want to. So, sometimes with new people, they'll come along and they might just listen for the first couple of meetings and then they'll say something. We've had some guys, well, like myself, really, who have come for years, and then they've joined the hosting team. So we have 5 hosts at the moment, kind of take it in turns. And it also gives other people, we had a guy, he lived in America. He was a host for a long time, and his life's got very busy with children. So he sort of had to step back a little bit. We've had some new hosts join, but yeah, sometimes we get people just come for one meeting.
Sure.
Sometimes they'll come for a good few months, every other Tuesday. They're every other Tuesday. And I think it's quite a magical space that I don't actually know where I'd be if I wasn't doing them.
Sure. Oh, that's
They've
great.
really, really helped me. Yeah.
They sound great. Like, I think these things, I really like how they have different ones for different topics and things, which I think is quite nice, because then at least, if you're coming, there's something you can, that you can find people that you relate to. So I think that's really powerful. Because that was one thing I think a lot of people struggle with when going through mental health issues. They don't talk to other people about it because they don't understand what I'm going through, which is, I don't believe in that now, but I can understand why people might feel that way in the moment. So that's really cool.
Yeah, there's started by 2 men, Ben and Jack. They're our gods. They started the charity because Jack's dad died. Then he met Ben and just very quickly told him that his dad had died, without knowing that Ben's dad was diagnosed with cancer and was also dying. So then they bonded over their very similar scenarios. And then that kind of relationship turned into the first meeting. So for a long time, it's very much grief related. And I think, it's still, I would say, it's seen as a grief, bereavement charity. But it has such a knock-on effect to other areas of your life, which I can testament to, losing my dad at 16, and then fast forward to my early 30s, and then my whole world was falling apart. And the 2 worlds are very well connected, that you don't have one without the other. So I think these other meeting spaces are really useful. But I think the best thing about TNN is that the impact it has on the individuals is the reason why it's grown so massively. And that from a meeting that started in London in 2018, now has 30 meetings throughout the globe. There's TNN Americas, TNN Hong Kong.
Oh, very cool.
They have Cantonese speaking meetings in Hong Kong. They have some wonderful ladies in France started their own. So there's TNN France, and they do French speaking grief meetings. And all of these groups have grown and expanded because the people in the meetings have felt so helped and supported. They want to give that to other people, and then that these meetings are really taken off, and that all the hosts are volunteers who have been in the meetings themselves and want to give back to others. They want to make sure that space is there for other people which is why I do it. I want to make sure that there's a space where somebody like me who was lost and sort of searching the internet one day found a space where suddenly he felt really welcomed at home. They can come and have that space, and that meeting exists for them as well.
No, that's awesome. Well, if you don't mind, there's a couple questions I always like to ask people at the end, if you don't mind. So first one is, are there any books you would recommend to people? Some people always, I think that's always a nice way for people to dip their toes in. So I didn't know if there's any books or even a podcast you're like, hey, I'd recommend having a listen.
Yeah, when I first was starting to struggle with my mental health, it's very confusing. I probably read a lot of books now. I don't read many books now. I should do, but I don't. Yeah, the Matt Haig book, is it Notes from a Lonely Planet?
Okay.
And I think the best thing about that book at the time was that it's just really honest. And he talks very openly about his own experiences with kind of mental health and attempting suicide. And it's just really honest. And he's very vulnerable. And they are literally notes, and that he goes through and is talking about things. And then there's just a section of the book where it's just a list of worries. And he's written down all the things that he's worrying about at the moment. And I think a big part of the Boys Talk meetings is encouraging men to be more vulnerable, and that we generally, as a species, very top level, we talk about very, very straight things like football and sport, politics, and you sort of go to the pub, and very, very rarely do we go under the surface and say, actually, I'm really struggling with X.
Yeah, that's very true.
There's all this pretense and all this sort of, oh yeah, I'm doing really well. Yeah, work's great, and blah blah blah. And that we don't have those difficult conversations, which now go, actually, why are we not having these conversations? And I have friends who I can have those conversations with. I'd still know people that will just know. Then I'm never going to talk about that, But what I thought was great about that book when I read it was that he was just really honest, and that he's talking about things that we as society wouldn't talk about in a very public setting. And I also at the time read Happy by Fan Cotton. I think that book, it was kind of given to me by a friend, but she describes quite beautifully, I think, her experiences with depression. And that was when I was like, oh, wait, oh, maybe that's what this is. I kind of suddenly related to what she was saying, and I could see in myself that that's how I was feeling. And it kind of really helped me know that there was more going on than I was just, a bit about stuff, or life was just too stressful. Yeah, they're quite good, but
that's great. I like just saying, let's not about us, about not having boring chat. It's funny, creating some merchandise for Manly Combos, and some of it, we were trying to make stuff that was, kind of a little more funny. And we were, one of the things we said was, men need hugs too. And it's another thing, like the guys that cry together stay together.
Oh yeah.
And this one I really appreciated, because one of the things that I was trying to figure out, I was trying to say, like, let's not chat about just sports, women, and money. And this is kind of that, because it is true. So that's conversations really true, that usually happen.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. I think we talk about Boys Talk, and just generally, I think with men's mental health, is that you have to set the example. And that's something that I think that I found from Ben originally, like finding that video on Instagram of him just setting the example of being vulnerable and being open and honest, and talking about something that I had hidden. We both experienced the same thing, but he was just telling everyone about it, whereas I told nobody about it. So yeah, now that I do these meetings and that I'm more comfortable talking openly and honestly about stuff, you do notice that people will then go, oh, wait, yeah, I can see that. And then they'll come to you maybe in a more private setting to say, oh, this is happening, and you're like, oh, that's great, and then you can have a conversation about it, but without setting the example first, so that's never going to happen.
Agree. Two more questions. If you were to die tonight, what would you regret not doing?
Oh, wasn't on the list, was it?
I don't put all of them on the list.
Throw that one in there. What would I regret not doing? I actually think, well, it's quite remarkable, isn't it? I don't think I actually any major ones.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. What would you not regret not doing?
I think for me, it'd be not having a family.
Yeah, you can. No, I'm joking.
I have a dog. I was like, but
Yeah.
not the same.
What was I regret not doing? I think like creeping in the back of my mind is like traveling more. I've been quite a home bird. I've grown up in this sort of southeast London. And when you live quite close to London, like sort of born here, you've got everything at your doorstep, really, that I've never really felt the need to travel. And that work-wise, I work in an industry where London is still kind of known as the kind of hub of creativity, and that you don't, there's quite a good level of creativity. Obviously, you could go to New York or somewhere and do it, but it's quite a good example of it just over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe traveling more just to experience more of the world and culture, and building that compassion for others and empathy more by really seeing what the world is actually like.
That's a good response. And the last one, if the next year were a couple of, next couple of years were a chapter, what would that chapter be?
It would actually be a chapter of Matt, I think. I think I've spent a long, long time putting myself second or third, and that kind of growing up. After my dad died, life became quite difficult, and it was all about work, and I didn't really have the support network that maybe other people would have had that had two parents. So I just kind of hit work really early, and then the kids came along and marriage, and then they always became kind of the kind of priorities, and I was always down the list, really down the list, which led to kind of poor mental health. I think I wasn't looking after me. I was always right down the list. Whereas now I think I've reached this kind of amazing chapter in my life where I've kind of got over the separation. I've done all this amazing work on myself and looked inwards a lot, kind of really found out what was happening, and that I feel like I'm in a really good place where I can go and do things for me more. Like there's still, I've still got to work a lot to pay for everything, but generally I'm kind of putting myself up the list a bit more now.
I like that.
Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. No one's actually said that yet, so I actually really like that, and I think that's a really powerful thing for people to hear, because I don't think a lot of people do that. And also, I'm sure I don't have a family, but I can imagine that being quite difficult to do that as well. So yes, I really, I really appreciate you joining today. I really appreciate the open and honesty and transparency. I think something we all need to do, well, men and women, but definitely men. It's something that we really struggle with. So yeah, appreciate you talking about your experience, and also about Boys Talk and everything like that. So hopefully people listen, and maybe they'll join one of the groups. So appreciate it.
Yeah. We've got one on Tuesday. I don't know how quickly you can get these out, but
no, this will come out in probably 6 to 8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a job, so I can't pump these out very fast.
But yeah, check us out. We're on Instagram on the New Normal Charity.com. I probably should know that, shouldn't I? But yes, come to a meeting. They're very enjoyable.
Great. Well, we'll definitely
thank you for having us. Mate,
definitely. Well, I'll put it on my direct. We just launched. I'm launching a directory for Manly Combos, which will have recommendation of books, professionals, and men's groups and nonprofits. So we'll put Boys Talk on there. So hopefully over time, as we gain a following, people will have a place to go get recommendations and find stuff.
So thank you for having me. Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.